Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to what's going to be the most boring. I have Parallax in my terminal. What? Hey, Vlad here from DevInsideYou.com. Welcome to another video. I finally found it, the best terminal. As a content creator, I am somewhat confined to use Windows, and I use WSL, and I made many videos about this. And unfortunately, even though we do have many options for terminal emulators on Windows, none of them are perfect. None of them satisfy my needs. So they either have bugs or at least limitations. My favorites so far have been Alacrity and the Windows Terminal, and I don't wish to reiterate the issues I had with them before because I've done this many times in the past. Also, I finally found something better, and I'll tell you all about it right after the message from our sponsors, scalajobs.com and rustjobs.dev. Check out the links in the description below if you're looking for a job. This video is also brought to you by awesome people like yourself who support me on Patreon. Your contributions allow me to pay for a video editor or free some of my time, which I then again choose to spend with you, whether it's during live streams or answering your questions on Discord. There's many of you and only one of me, so all it takes to support tech education is just $1. Thank you. All right, the terminal we're talking about today is a GPU-accelerated cross-platform terminal emulator and multiplexer written in Rust in late 2017 by Wes Farlong, who is an early PHP contributor and also an ex-Facebook/Meta employee. He's built a couple of other cool things already, most notably Watchman and EdenFS. If you don't know him, allow me to paraphrase. He knows what he's doing, which is also why he named the terminal emulator after himself. It's called WezTerm, as in Wez terminal. So it's not just a terminal emulator, it's also a terminal multiplexer, and it also has some SSH features. Now, let me be upfront with you about something. I did not check out those features. I might one day, and then I'll make a video about it, so you might want to subscribe. I took a look at it because, as I already mentioned, I wasn't satisfied with my choices. In fact, I stumbled on it because somebody mentioned it on a 2.5-year-old GitHub issue on Windows Terminal. I'm glad to report that I tried it and it worked like a charm. I mentioned in the beginning that this is going to be my most boring video, and then I made a joke about Parallax, but every joke has a grain of truth. So I'm not planning on showing you any fancy features this terminal has to offer. In fact, I mentioned many times that I'm only a part-time content creator and a full-time dev. And as such, I need something that works. I'm more interested in stability than speed, for example. I'm saying this because this terminal is not exactly slow, but it's also not the fastest, even though it's written in Rust, so it's supposed to be blazingly fast by default. The main reason I'm making this video is because as a content creator, I'm frequently being asked about my setup, and so I need videos to refer you guys to. And so this is pretty much going to be just a demo. We're going to scroll through my config and stuff. By the way, I have a video about syncing your .dot files with Stove. However, I do this only on Linux, right? So inside of WSL. However, we're talking about the terminal that I'm running on Windows. So my settings are not backed up anywhere. However, I will upload it somewhere so that you guys don't have to, pause the video and type it out. It's just that I cannot guarantee that it's going to be kept up to date in case you're watching this in 2035 or whatnot. So we're going to click around over here in just a second, but for now, let me disappoint you a little bit. I am a tmux user, and you can actually use WezTerm as a tmux multiplexer. So you can install it on the server and then allow it to connect directly to it. I haven't played with it yet, as I already mentioned. I was just looking for something that just works, doesn't have bugs, doesn't have limitations that, that concern me. And so one of the things that you should know is that this parallax effect that I showed you in the beginning, over here. By the way, it's done by Wiki Wendelik, and I'll show it to you in the documentation. Basically, I literally copy-pasted the code from the documentation. Is configured in Lua, by the way, super simple language. And in there is also a link to these elements that you need, right? So this is a background, and there's a layer with like these tentacles and whatever. There's a couple of overlays, right? So basically, this is how it looks like. And if you scroll, you got some parallax. So that thing does not work inside of tmux, right? Because scrolling and everything works differently. In fact, let me actually close this one. I'll show you. I'll probably close this one. Okay, so I run WSL like this. So I have several WSL distributions inside. I don't know why it spawned like this. Usually it spawns in a full screen. I'll show you my config in just a second. And I recently updated my WSL videos. I did a third video to the WSL playlist. And in that one, I mentioned that systemd is finally supported. And so if you enable systemd, WSL actually takes a while to load. Okay. So what I want to show you is that, like, if I scroll over here, like there's no parallax. Okay. However, you can use videos. Okay. In fact, let me actually throw this one. Oh, it's actually in the correct one. Okay. So let me actually go like this. I'm going to put it over here, right? And see how it stretched right now. All of this stuff you can configure and fix. Okay. So this is my config. We're going to go through it in just a second. For now, I just want to basically throw out this background, this parallax stuff. So it basically says background, and then you have a bunch of layers, right? So every layer has a source, and like this one, the lowest layer is the first layer is the lowest layer, right? So this is the background. So again, this is downloaded straight from the documentation. This entire piece of code is copy pasted straight from the documentation. So I'm actually gonna throw it out, and I'm gonna show it to you a little bit later. Okay, so if I throw it out like this, background will actually be replaced with a video. Okay, and it's a funny thing that you have a lot of controls over here about what you're gonna do. So this is an image that usually looks like this. Well, it's not an image; it's a GIF, I believe. Okay, but you can do like opacity and things like this. Let me just say a couple of things about the terminal, and then we're gonna go through the website. Okay, so the first thing is that the documentation is very great. I want to show you my cool shortcuts. So again, like as a content creator, I'm kind of confined to use Windows. So if we search for path, so over here environment variables, I always put a folder on the path, which one is it? It's this one. Okay, so this folder is just a folder with a bunch of shortcuts. Okay, one of those shortcuts is a shortcut to actually open that folder, and it's called path. So I'm actually going to show it to you in just a second. Okay, so if I run path, right, so I always do like Windows R and I run path. By the way, there are many apps that do something like this, but they usually search for stuff, and this one is not searching, right? So I need to be very explicit about what I'm typing, which is why it's also faster, right? I don't need to wait for the search to be found. Okay, so this is a bunch of shortcuts over here, and a couple of them are for the Windows terminal. So if I go WTerm, right? So if I were to do WTerm, it would actually start the Windows terminal as it did before. This is what you saw in the beginning, right? However, I also have WS, WD, and there should be a WW somewhere over here, right? So whenever I use WSL, I use three distributions. One is called Space. This is my workspace where I prepare my videos. And the one is called DevInsideYou. This is the one that is open right here. This is the one that I use when I record my videos. And the other one I use for work. And so if I do WD, it will start this one, right? And so I wanted to show you how I configured it to do that. First of all, when you go through the installation on Windows, you can use a portable version, which is the one that I used. And so it actually has very great documentation. It shows you where you can put your config, and one of those places is exactly into the folder, right? Because with a portable version, like the idea is that you should be able to put it like on a USB stick and stick it somewhere else, and your config should be there. Okay, so if I go like this, and it's going to be very tiny. So I'm gonna show it over here, and also we're gonna zoom in. But basically, this is where I have my portable version. Okay, and after this, I said, okay, --config. I know it's super tiny. We're gonna zoom in for you guys, and then default change working directory equals, and I've showed this to you in my WSL videos, right? So bunch of slashes, WSL $, DevInsideYou, which is my WSL distributions for recording videos over here, and then home vlad, right? So this tiny thing, it overrides the part in the config with the starting directory, because usually when you start WSL, it drops you in the home directory of the Windows user, right? And this is not what I want, okay? And then what I have later is space and then start, and I'm telling it to start my WSL distributions for DevInsideYou, right? So start space 2 hyphens space WSL-D DevInsideYou. All right, so this is how when I run this command, it will run, the DevInsideYou one, and if I run WS, it's going to run my the one for space, and it's going to take a while because, as already mentioned, because it's running systemd, it's going to take a while to start, and then I'm going to be able to enter my password and stuff, and it drops me into home vlad instead of the other one. The one for the Windows user, okay? And it started in full screen because at the very top, again, it's in Lua. If you've never written any Lua, it's a super simple language. So you basically say local WezTerm equals require WezTerm, right? You can copy paste this from the documentation, and then you just return this one gigantic JSON looking object where you do like WezTerm dot, so on this local variable, you do WezTerm dot. And this incantation allows it to start in full screen. Again, I'll upload this thing somewhere so you don't have to worry about it, because you have a full-blown programming language over here. It's a scripting language, but still, you can actually extract like parts over here. So this local dimmer was used before in this parallax part that I have removed, so I can actually remove it. It's not being used anywhere. Okay, so over here, I'm returning my entire config, a bunch of things. We're going to go through it in just a second. It has built-in themes. I'm actually going to go and show this to you. So over here, I prepared a couple of color schemes for you. They're all listed on the website. It's written exactly what you need to paste over here. And I've actually overwritten a couple of colors over here. So maybe we should do something like, I don't know, let me do like NeoFetch, and over here, we're going to run some like htop just to see some colors. If I go over here to this color section, if I just comment it out like this, then the colors from the theme are going to be used, right? So like a popular theme is something like Cappuccino, for example, right? Or maybe some like Ocean, or some like One Dark. Okay, as you can see, like I can leave this one in there because the one at the bottom, will be used. Okay, so you can use it, and then you can override a couple of colors. I believe this is referred to as dynamic themes. Okay, and this one is also popular, Kanagawa. Okay, so I'm pretty much used to Space Gray, and over time, I kind of mixed it with the Visual Studio Code theme. So I've pretty much overridden like all the colors at this point. So yeah, it has a lot of super cool features. It has a custom font for the Unicode box drawing characters. In fact, Alacrity had this as well, and it was kind of weird. They released it, and then it worked for me, and then another release broke it. And I found the setting. I tried to play around with the setting, but it didn't work. As I already mentioned, a bunch of tiny issues like this with Windows Terminal and Alacrity. So you got, emojis. If you're not familiar on Windows, you can hold the Windows key and press, semicolon, also a dot. And, if I pick an emoji over here, they've been displayed correctly. Obviously, this command doesn't exist. Also, pay attention to this thing. This is called reverse video cursor. Okay, so it basically takes the color that is around, right? So if I go to my dev folder somewhere, and let's see, let's find some .scala file, and I'm just going to open something like this. Okay, so if I just open it with Vim, notice how the background of the cursor takes the color of what used to be in the foreground, and the foreground just becomes black. Okay, so if I go to D, for example, then the background becomes white, right? Alacrity does this by default actually as well. Windows Terminal does not, and over here you can decide, whether you want to enable it or not. It's a super nice feature. As you can see, ligatures over here work. Emojis work. There are no weird tmux bugs. Everything works like a charm. Also the mouse support works. So if I go and enable, the mouse mode, I can start like dragging things around. Even in Vim, if I go and do a split, right, then I can go and grab it, and I can, move things around. So it's up to you, whether you want mouse support or not. I'm actually going to disable it over here. Another cool thing is that, the mouse disappears when I type. This actually might be a Windows feature. In Alacrity, it's built in, but for this one, I believe that this is a Windows feature. So if I search for mouse settings, and click on additional mouse options over here, and I go to, I believe, pointer options, there's this hide pointer while typing, but not every application respects it. Okay, now the Windows Terminal, to be fair, respects it, and it looks like WezTerm respects it as well. Okay, so when I'm going to start typing, the cursor will disappear, which is really awesome because often I record, tutorials and demos and whatnot. As I already mentioned, it's not the fastest, but it's pretty fine. I'd much rather prefer stability than things like this, right? So this is AsciiQuarium. For some reason, AsciiQuarium, instead of using my background, it actually uses what I use for the black color. So if I were to change this one, right? So if I'm going to copy that one, and I'm just going to go and make it red, FF0000. For some reason, it takes this one as a background. On Alacrity, for some reason, it doesn't do this, right? So if I actually revert this, by the way, this is one thing, pretty much the only thing that I don't like in the configuration is that over here you don't have key values. You just kind of need to know that, okay, first is black, then it's red, then it's green, and so on. So if I were to open, I have the same things for Alacrity, right? So if I go D, right, which is going to be like Alacrity, DevInsideYou, then it's going to start the same thing. And because it's tmux, right, it's going to connect to the same settings. And as you can see, in Alacrity, it actually uses my background by default. I actually don't know. Maybe it's a setting somewhere. I tried to find it, but I couldn't. Okay, so I'm going to close that one. And as you can see, like, there was an error code, so it's red. So if I go like this, then it's going to be green. And this is something that you can turn on and off, like if you like it or not. So if I go for reverse, right? So if I go like this, and as you can see, it's like normal, white. But again, if I open Vim, then I actually prefer it, right? So as you can see now, everything is white. So I'm actually going to go back and enable it because I liked it. I like it. I didn't like this thing in the beginning that it affected that one as well, but I actually kind of got used to it. So now I actually kind of like it. Let me go through my config real quick, and then we're going to go through the website as well. I believe I mentioned everything that I wanted to mention. All right. So again, I just went through the docs, and they list every single key over here with a tiny description of what it does. And so I just went through the whole thing and I adjusted, and it's basically like 100 lines. Yeah, pretty much exactly 100 lines. And that's only pretty much because I overwrote my colors, right? So it's actually not that much that you need to change by default. Adjust window size when changing font size, right? So it has an automatic loading feature of the config, right? So if I were to change something in the config, it would actually automatically load it, as I have shown it to you already. And when I would change the font, it would actually jump around. It actually still jumps around when you change stuff. Notice that it's in full screen, right? And I go here, I come back. This is Windows Workspaces, by the way. It stays in full screen, everything is fine. However, as soon as I change something, like for example, I'm going to remove the background, I'm going to go over here. For some reason, it forgot that it's supposed to be in full screen. Okay, so whatever, go back in full screen. Okay, so it still jumps around sometimes, but whatever. How often do you actually change the config? All right, so let me bring it back over here. False, but again, it's still something. It actually did fix it for fonts, right? So when I was messing around with fonts, it would jump around like this, but once I enabled this, it actually stopped jumping around like this. Okay, audible bell, I don't want that. Colors, we can pretty much minimize. Background stuff, the documentation is really great. You can do opacity stuff, you can dim stuff, you can decide, whether height and width should be contained, all kinds of things. Really thought through. I can remove this thing because I'm using space gray. So basically, as you can see, like the config is even less than 100 lines. Okay. Disable default key bindings. Yes, I prefer to do this true because I was running into some issues. So I just defined a couple of my own. It's a simple JSON. You go action WezTerm dot action. So you're calling something on this WezTerm object over here. You got some modes. All right. So Control-Shift-C is going to be copy. Control hyphen is going to be decrease font size, and so on. It's very trivial. It's all very well documented. Okay. One of the great things over here is in the font that it supports stylistic sets. If you're not familiar with them, fancy fonts like Fira Code allow you to have stylistic sets. For example, one of them that I know from that was the wrong key combination. From the top of my head, one that I'm using. So if I'm gonna do the and symbol, right? So notice how it looks like. However, if I remove these settings, it will actually look like this. Okay. So not every font, but like fancy fonts, they have fancy features like this. Okay, so I enabled a couple. Also, the letter R, for example, changes. We don't have R, so here we go, a bunch of R's. Like one of those controls how it's going to look like. As you can see, it has like a tiny tail. There's a bunch of others for how the zero looks like and whatnot. All right, font size. You can have fractal font size. A force reverse video cursor. I already showed you that thing. That was the thing with the colors. Hide tab bar if only one tab. This is actually a cool thing. So it has a tab bar, and it has like if you click on plus over here, well, actually if you right click on plus over here, it actually shows you my WSL distribution, similar to how Windows Terminal would do this. Okay. Also, it has a couple of other commands. A bunch of commands and stuff. Okay, but I'm pretty much not using tabs, so I'm gonna click over here. So it starts see, like this is what usually happens when you start a WSL distribution. It goes into the home folder of the Windows user. Hold up, what? Yes, kill tab. Okay, so I don't want tabs because I'm pretty much using tmux, so I'm using tabs inside over here, right? So I can go like this. Why does it not create a new tab? Did I disable? I accidentally disabled stuff. F2. And by the way, if you have the mouse mode, then you can actually jump through them like this. Well, I should probably type something in them so that you see the difference. Okay, so as you can see over here, I can go through them like that. But I rarely use the mouse, so I'm actually gonna remove the mouse. Also, I have a video about configuring. This is technically Biobu, which is a wrapper around tmux. I have a video about this to show you how to configure all of that stuff. So this is the keys where you went through the keys. Scroll back lines, just 10,000, whatever. Show update window. I've never seen this before, but pretty much like when there is an update, it will tell me about an update. It has this thing about dat keys. Dat keys is a thing, for example, in if I'm going to switch the language to Portuguese. Like sometimes I need to press a key and only then press another key, and then it will do something like this. Like this E was a, I don't even know how this thing is called. Was this apostrophe thing, right? So basically when I press my first key, the terminal didn't do anything. It was just waiting. This is called a dead key. The documentation was pretty much saying like, hey, if you're a Vim user, you might want to disable it. So I did disable it. It has a very, in fact, it has super detailed documentation about everything, about how freaking Windows works, not the Windows terminal works, not the Windows terminal, like how terminals in general, terminal emulators work, how your freaking keyboard works, about how freaking Unicode works, right? And so by default, it uses Unicode version, I believe 9, which is like the most supported one. And so it's had like basically like, hey, you can update to the, to the highest one. And if you don't have any issues, then keep it. So I updated. And again, it has documentation about this stuff, okay? Windows close confirmation, never prompt. And you can have Windows padding. Like for example, over here, you can set it up with percentages, with pixels and whatever. So if I remove this one, you're going to see that it has like a little bit of padding, a little bit less padding at the top. So I basically configured it to my screen size. All right. So now let's go through the website real quick. So you pretty much start over here. You can like look at like all of these cool features that it has. But if you pretty much go to install, you will see, Windows, blah, blah, blah. Windows has a portable version, so I just downloaded this zip. I just extracted it. The next thing that you need to look around is at configuration. It has this wonderful chart that tells you, what the fallback for looking for configuration is. I use pretty much this one, right? So if we're running on Windows and WezTerm.lua exists in the folder, and it does, then pick it up, right? So this is the one that I'm using, right? So this is done for like thumb drives, USB keys, and very, 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 very great documentation. Then pretty much go through like this stuff. This is like the basic stuff, like basic explanations about like how to launch alternative programs. Like this is what I did, when I showed it, to launch WSL instead of just starting the terminal. It has documentation about fonts. It has documentation about font shaping, was fancy things like these stylistic sets and stuff. It has, like, as I already mentioned, like keyboard content. It literally explains to you how the freaking keyboard works, and with complicated diagrams about like what is going to happen with every key. Luckily, I didn't need any of that because everything just worked for me out of the box, even though I am on Windows. And I'm pretty sure that it's going to work even better on Mac and Linux. Key bindings, it explains like the default key bindings, how to configure key bindings. This is like the things that you can use for like the F keys and stuff. Key tables. I think this is like multiple key binding rules that you can have, right? So you can switch between like one set of key bindings to another set of key bindings. I did not need that because I'm like, I'm having a hard time remembering one table. So there we go. Default key assignments, and it tells you that you can disable them actually. So yeah, and by the way, it has its own tabs, it has its own window panes, stuff about mouse, color appearance, color schemes over here, right? So you just click on color schemes, you go to something like, let's find Capuchin is the really famous one, right? So just go here, go like Capuchin, there you go, Capuchin Frappe, or Frappe, whatever. I'm not a coffee drinker, so I don't know what I'm talking about. So this is the thing that you need to paste in there. Obviously, it's just color scheme equals some string. And then pretty much, like after you're done with this, like if you just want to go through like all of the key references, you just go over here to 19.7 struct config, okay? And it lists like all of these settings that I have, right? So for example, this one, you just go like this, it shows you a teeny tiny documentation, it shows like this is the setting, adjust window size when charging fonts size equals true. If you're not a programmer, by the way, you should know that like all of these documentation parts, they all show you like these things. Basically, you need to merge all of them into one big return, right? So you have like a return, and then you just list all of them, right? Just one big return, comma, comma, comma. All right. And that's pretty much it. So take it for a spin. I might check out those fancy features like the terminal multiplexer stuff, and it has like built-in SSH and whatnot. I might check them out a bit later, and I might make videos about them, so you might want to subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this one. Check out the previous one, and I'm going to see you in the next one. For now, as always, it's been Vlad from DevInsideYou.com. Don't forget to like this video if you did, subscribe if you want to improve the developer inside you, and if you wish to support tech education, please consider doing so on Patreon or GitHub sponsors, and watch my videos before everyone else. And most importantly, take care.